To order at 4:03 p.m., a couple minutes late today. We'll start with the vision and mission statement of Santa Rosa City College, which is Santa Rosa City College strives to build a socially conscious community where knowledge and respect empower individuals to transform the world. So, can we do the Pledge of Allegiance?
Okay. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Veronica is not here right now, but she texted me that she'll be on her way. And I do want to acknowledge that student trustee Crystal Farmer has resigned from the board, so that's why she's not here today, but thank her for her great service to our college. And then welcome everybody else for being here. Thank you. So we're going to start off with public comment. Have we received any slips for public comment? Peter has.
I wasn't sure who was going to start.
Oh yeah, no worries.
Yeah, here.
Great, thank you. So first up is Jeff Green to talk about the College Promise.
Sorry, that took me a moment. Thank you, members of the board. I'm here mostly today because some of you know that we've had an interesting start to the fall with the advent of several new Promise efforts, or at least that go under the same title. And we are hoping to agendize for a future meeting some time to really walk through a map of it. Actually, our staff and college staff are jointly working on a flyer and a couple of things that can be used to sort of explain it to everyone. But in conversations I've had with Dr. Beebe and Dr. Ralston and others, it's clear that we need to do a sort of a full community training on how these things all do or do not fit together. So with an eye on the time, I will briefly outline for you sort of what we're seeing, because I think it's important that you all hear from what it looks like on the ground as far as the College Promise grant, the AB 19 California College Promise, and of course I was going to say the original, but it's not the original, SBCC Promise, and how these all fit together. So to be brief about it, so the SBCC Promise, we began that in the fall of 2016. So we've gone through 2 full years, 4 regular semesters. We're in our 5th, and 2 sets of double summer sessions. So that's the experience we have in that program. To date, it's been very successful. What we're seeing is an actual increase in enrollment and new enrollment this fall in particular. We won't know for sure because things do take a while to settle out, but by the end of this semester, we'll be able to give some updated data as I've been doing on a fairly regular basis, giving you a sense of what that growth has been. Now this is the program, and I know you know this, but I feel it's important to say it out loud. This is the effort that is open to all graduates within our district who complete their high school or equivalent in our district. We've added recently formally an and/or residency. We have a handful of folks that actually live in the district and for various reasons are schooled outside but then come back. So we want to, again, we're always erring on the side of inclusion. And of course, all members of the campus community, their immediate children, their immediate family members are also eligible for it. So what we do with that is 2 complete years of support, all enrollment fees, all books, and all required books and all required supplies for any student who can maintain what we ask of them, and that is simply to enroll within 2 primary semesters after the completion of their secondary education, to remain in good standing with the college, to seek out academic counseling resources at least once per semester, and really they can then choose almost any path within our college, and wherever they want to go, whatever they want to pursue, we will support them through 2 full years. So that, and I won't go further on that because you know this one, we've been talking about it regularly for the last several years. The new piece actually all started last summer. So what happened is in July, the Chancellor's Office had done some marketing research and decided that the Board of Governors fee waiver or BOG waiver was not working as far as the branding and recognition of the program. It was absolutely working as a program, and of course it's been a very robust one since the early 1980s with the introduction. It was introduced right on the heels of fees, as a way for those who were at the economic margins to not have that barrier. What happened is they decided to simply rebrand the program. So the Board of Governors fee waiver this year is known as the California College Promise Grant. That shows up on a student's invoicing in that without those terms. And so what that's led to is people seeing that and seeing, oh, I'm a Promise student. Of course, we, for the last 2 years, have been branding SBCC Promise, so now you have the BOG waiver rebranded as the Promise. So it is actually gotten very confusing for a large number of students because there are many more students who qualify for a formerly Board of Governors fee waiver, now California College Promise Grant, and we're shortening it to CCPG. So you'll start hearing that acronym, which we can't pronounce, but that's okay. And that is still a core piece of our SBCC Promise insofar as we require all SBCC Promise students to ask for, or at least apply for, through one of the several doors, the former BOG waiver, now California College Promise Grant. It does not matter whether they get it or not. We just want to make sure that if they're eligible that they do receive it, and then we do the rest. So that's all. Ours is still completely privately funded through the foundation. The SBCC Promise, that hasn't changed. It is only growing. It's been very successful. The BOG waiver, former BOG waiver, now CCPG, has not changed either, but the name change has been very, very challenging. And then the third piece of it, which is really yet to be defined, is what was known as AB 19, or the California College Promise, which was advertised initially as really free college statewide. The problem is that is not true and never was true. So what it was calculated based on the number of potential, at the time, BOG waiver eligible students, and what is the remainder of first year, first time, full-time students that needed additional support. But when the actual dollars were made available, and they have now been distributed, there was a great deal of leeway given to each campus. And in fact, our college leadership, as you may well know, is currently figuring out how we will want to use that. The challenge for us isn't those dollars. They're great. It's great dollars. It's a little over $500,000 for our district. The challenge is it's also been branded as a college promise. So this is all to set up for you, and I know my time is up, that we want to come back and really spend some time helping everyone understand how these things go together. We are absolutely supportive of every step in that right direction, but we want to make sure that people understand there is a real difference between who is eligible, how it's funded, and how you access it. So we wanted to raise that for you, and if there's any questions, I don't know if you can do that during public comment, I'll take them. Otherwise, we'll come back to it another time.
If anyone has clarifying questions right now, we can ask a small
I would certainly urge that you come back, because there are some questions and we're proscribed from asking them at this point.
Right.
But I think it'd be a wonderful idea. Certainly my heartfelt congratulations for really taking some major risks and doing the right thing for our students, and they're prospering for it.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we will be back.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mr. Chair.
Next up, we have Denise Spangler-Adams to speak on general item, information.
Good afternoon, Board of Trustees. I want to again thank you for your service and dedication to the college, which I share as a former foundation member starting in 1980. And I have great affinity, as does our community, to the college, and we want to thank you because it would not be the stellar institution that it is without its faculty and leadership. So thank you. I'm here today because lots of things are going on in our community, as well as what we all observe nationally. And your channel's newspaper, I think, summed it up for many of us in the community who are your strong allies and donors historically. The channels wrote that with freedom of speech comes a responsibility to express yourself respectfully and to refrain from forcing your views on others. And I think if we all took pause as adults and realized our impact on students and what's happening, we might conduct our affairs differently. I came today in part to apprise you of what's going on in the K through 12 district, knowing that you're part of our K through 14 California district. We are heavily involved in the K through 12 with social justice issues, social justice warriors, and the concerns that that entails as relates to freedom of speech and everyone feeling comfortable on campuses. So one of our concerns is looking at people's mission statements, which yours, I know you put a lot of thought into your vision and your mission statement, but what we would like you to consider at some future time is looking at your mission statement to add that part of your responsibility is to educate and to prepare students to best serve our nation in addition to the world in the 21st century. We see, just like in the Santa Barbara Unified School District mission statement, even at the elementary level, people are saying that we are now training for empowerment and to be global. And it's nothing about vocational or skill sets or academics. And I, as Mr. Haslam knows well, I'm grateful to the institution because I know my son would never have been admitted to MIT if it wasn't for the education he got here, right here, starting in 5th grade in your math program, and then leading forward. You do an outstanding job for those students who want to serve our country. But when the focus shifts from academics, vocational training into empowerment, that we want them to be socially conscious. That's important, but I think there's more to education to that than that. So we've been looking at mission statements, vision statements, and we would like to ask trustees to look at theirs so that things that are happening at the K through 12 level, which we view to be potentially divisive and also dangerous, and certainly would adversely impact our ability to approach donors who like what you do. And I'm not saying to stagnate, I'm just saying if it's not broken, don't fix it. So that was one of our requests, and we want you to be aware that we, through investigative reporting, as well as a lot of other work that's been accomplished, there are many links between what's happening in the K through 12 district as coming into yours. There's a web network, and a lot of this will be forthcoming in the months to going forward. But again, we want everyone to feel empowered to speak, and it's how to do it in a respectful, decent way so that we all listen. And I always was taught that divided we fall and united we thrive. So if we all stick to that, hopefully we can move forward and keep our strong donor base and keep this the #1 college in the United States. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Vice President Aboud. I should have had Jonathan stay here. Thank you, guys. I just chaperoned a field trip for Santa Barbara High School. It was with 27 high school girls at a dance recital. So we are now moving on to governing board, which is revision or approval of our minutes. So is there a motion to approve the minutes from September 13th and the special meeting of September 24th?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, it's been moved by trustee Croninger and seconded by trustee Nielsen to approve the regular minutes of September 13th, 2018, and the special meeting of September 24th, 2018. All in favor? Or is there any discussion, actually? No? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Brings us to item 5.1, which is governing board revision to board policies. Would you like to preface that for us, Dr. Dupuy?
Yeah, I'd actually like to pull this from the agenda this time to be brought back at a later date. There's some edits and some other things that we want to be able to do to this.
Thank you for cleaning that up for us so that we can have a good discussion. And this was just first reading, so it'll come back as first reading again, and then second reading. My neck. And that brings us to item 6.1. This is great, sabbatical reports. Thanks, my friend.
Okay, good. So thank you. My name is Stephen Strand from Computer Science, and I'm going to give you a synopsis of my sabbatical. So it had 5 components, really. This is the first one. The 5 components were developing automated grading system that the students would use live while they're developing their programs. This was for engineers You can see automated assessment from MATLAB. The engineering students take this their first or second year. So I developed these grading scripts for a number of different assignments. A typical assignment might look like this, where students are given a brightness over time curve, brightness from a star, and if the planet for that star is in the same in the plane from Earth to that star, then you'll actually notice a dip in brightness of the sun or the star. And students analyze this to learn some information about the planets, okay? And then they write some code to detect it and give us some properties. When they're done, or even as they're working, they'll get the grade script going, and it looks about like this. They'll get an explanation of the score they're getting and where they went wrong. In fact, so here you can see the scores they got, but also it'll give them links. So maybe they get a link to where they got an error or they had a problem, then maybe some additional information, takes them to a web page like Wikipedia that maybe explains the relationship between transit time and orbital period or whatever it is, okay? And so I developed a number of these different assignments and grade sheets so that students can sort of almost add a gamification effect to their programming assignments. Right, so for that then I wrote a second layer of software above this to take all the submissions for a particular assignment, grade them all at once, and collect the results into Excel spreadsheet. There you can see the student names, their scores, as well as what they got wrong or if they were late on an assignment, that kind of thing. And this then is used as feedback through Canvas so students get their scores kind of immediately. Okay. All right, so that was for the Programming for Engineers course. That's step one here. A second component of the sabbatical was to take a similar idea to a couple other courses I've got where I've already got automated grade scripts for the correct output on their programs, okay? So they get some input, doesn't give a correct output, but I want to add another layer to this for other courses, which was, are you doing it well? Okay, it's not just, you know, are you giving me a go-kart, but are you giving me a Lexus? Okay, so you're producing a Lexus. So so this one then was applicable to 3 other courses, Theory and Practice 2, Software Design Patterns, and Software Engineering. You'll see a bit more about those in a minute. But the sorts of feedback that they get with this automated system, again, live while they're developing their software and part of their grades, the grade feedback is immediate, will be things like this. It'll analyze their code and go in there, maybe hard for you folks to figure this out, but you can see the word complexity. This student's code was just too complex. And complexity leads to bugs, difficult to maintain, difficult to update software, and ultimately it just costs a lot of money to write. So this is all about them making better software, or maybe cleaner software. At the bottom, they've got some unnecessary stuff in their code, which is making it dirty or clean and unclean. So, and so this is applicable then to Theory and Practice. It's live right now in the course, also been used in Software Design Patterns and Software Engineering this spring. On the topic of Theory and Practice, the third component of my sabbatical was really tied to this theory part. This course is called CS 106, and so we really focus on the theory there. It's the science of computer science. A lot of concepts are abstract, a little bit hard to approach. So I went out and did a survey of resources on the web that are available to animate or visualize these concepts, algorithms, data structures, and then where I couldn't find stuff on the web, I made my own. So a couple examples. Excellent one off the web is literally a website called Visualgo. It's visualize algorithms, so it's sort of perfect for what I want. And you can see that it sort of color codes these data structures and algorithms. It's a fantastic website from the standpoint that students get the ability to sort of move backwards and forwards through an algorithm and see how it might change the data structure. Not shown, but it has these flyouts that let them pick, well, what if the data was unsorted, or what if the data was random? And they can do what if scenarios and then see how the structure might change and the algorithm might change. Furthermore, they also not shown, but on the right is a flyout that shows the code that would generate this and animate it. So as this thing's coloring the different parts of the data structure, you see the lines of code which are doing that. So they get a direct connection between the visualization and the code that they'll be writing. So, and so for many websites exist out there to do the data structures and algorithms that we study, but not all. So where I couldn't find what I was looking for, I kind of learned how to do animations in PowerPoint, and I just made my own. Here's an example from something that sorts data. And again, the students are able to step forward or back through these animations, and they've got accompanying code that goes with it. And here we see, a petition finishing up, and you see that, okay, well, this algorithm works by sort of getting things a little bit more sorted, and then we run this again, it gets a little more sorted, and finally fully sorted, okay? So that's 3 of the components. There were 2 other components in the sabbatical. One was the creation of a new Skills Competency Award for software engineering. This one's live as of fall. And I did a survey of similar programs that are out in other colleges, universities, to inform the course choices I made. I'd say the closest one that we have is out at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, but all of these courses transfer to CSU or UC or both. So, and this will be, so let's see, I guess the capstone course for students who's motivated, they'll be able to get this SCA starting this spring. And I think that, I don't know, we probably have 10 students already who are, who, if they take this course, will be applicable, and they're eligible for this SCA. And let's see, the final part of my sabbatical was, right, to become proficient and really fluent in a dominant tool in the software industry now called Git, and the associated website called GitHub. This is a site that's used to manage software, so software these days comes in many versions, you'll have noticed, but it also branches. And managing all these branches and versions is quite a task. Git has become the dominant tool out there. So I learned all there was to know about Git and GitHub, and then I even integrated into my workflow here at City College. So you can see that I've kind of put 27 of the projects that I teach my students and the software that's related to that up on the website, and I'm updating it kind of as we go here, even recently. So I kind of have this part of my workflow now, and it's my tool of choice, as it were. So that's a synopsis of my sabbatical, and I'm happy to answer questions online or offline that you might have. So, thank you.
Nicely done, thank you so much.
I have a question. So if you get the SCA, what could you transfer that directly into employment, or is that something you'd then take to university?
Oh, I'd say that's something that the employer would like to see. You can definitely imagine someone who's out in industry coming back and just getting this degree. This is, it's a skills competency award. It's not a full degree. And employers and students both know the difference. So an employee might want to come back and get just say, now I know how to do these particular tasks. All the courses that are a part of that, every employer will understand those.
Okay.
And they'll appreciate it, so yeah.
Great.
Other questions?
I was just going to say, in terms of the automated quality control and grading system, I could really see how that could be great for giving, feedback to students so they understand right now what they've done wrong and what they need to do better.
Absolutely.
And in terms of efficiency of coding, I can see how that could really improve that.
Yeah, and it takes advantage of something that's sort of particular to computer science, the structured answers. Programming has a structure to it that we can exploit to really give a deep analysis of whether or not they did a good job. And maybe even in a way that you can't do with normal, let's say, an English text. Tough to give deep analyses, but in computer science, we can really give deep analysis of the quality of their code because it's so structured. So we take advantage of that. Yeah.
I think your sabbatical is a great example of how it helps you stay current in your world and bring that back to the classroom so that the students are learning current information.
Yeah, thank you.
So congratulations.
Yes, thank you. This whole coding and world is new, not new to people that aren't engineers, but I've had friends really encourage me and say, Vero, just how you teach kids to read, you have to teach them to code, and just to look at Scratch, even for young kids already. So it's just amazing.
Yeah, I think it's a part of many students' future, so.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, and just kudos to your department because, the Santa Barbara High doesn't have a lot of the courses there for reasons, but they have the pathway. And so the feedback from families from the computer science courses that students have taken here has been just phenomenal. So
Great, I appreciate it.
you guys are
I'll
doing
pass it on
great.
as well.
Yes.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. Okay, the long-awaited item 6.2, facilities master plan draft review and discussion. Lindsay, look at all that paperwork.
So Lindsay's been, and her team have been working for quite some time to get to this point. And one of the things that we want to make sure we stress is that this is a draft. Right, Lindsay? It's a draft.
Yeah.
Oh, it's part of the video.
Oh, I know, worlds. Something's vibrating.
That really got me.
I was doing the same thing. Whose phone is that?
I know.
It's from the foundation, not from. the board voted to do this. Too nice. Yeah.
Dr. Beebe, go ahead.
You guys are getting fancy.
Yeah, it's too fancy. But yeah, I just wanted to stress that what we're trying to do here is provide some information for you so that we can get some input from you, because it isn't a finished product yet. And so we're going to be getting input from you and several other cohort groups, including community members as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Lindsay.
I was going to say good evening, but I think I'm actually up here before evening for the first time in a long time. Good afternoon, President Gallardo, board members, and Dr. Beebe. I'm very excited to be presenting the Facilities Master Plan draft to you this evening. We have been working on this for a very long time, much longer than as I've been in this role. We've had a lot of different documentation and work go on for many years related to creating this document. And we started the process of getting the actual facility master plan written back last year in November, when we started working with our consulting firm, who I'm going to introduce in just a minute. So we started back in November, and then we had unfortunate events with fires and mudslides, and it kind of slowed us down a little bit. But we're back, and we have our draft now, so we're excited to be able to start talking about it tonight. We've already been on, I call it the roadshow, the Shared Governance Roadshow, presenting to multiple groups, and we have a lot more presentations to do as well, and we'll talk about that timeline in the middle of the presentation tonight. So I'm going to introduce Mr. Jeff Kellogg. He is with Moss Companies. Moss Companies is, yes, exactly the same last name as mine, even spelled the same, of no relation at all. Completely coincidental. Moss is actually a really common German name like Smith, so it happens. I meet a lot of other Mosses in the world. So Jeff Kellogg is a consultant with them. He'll talk a little bit about himself as well, but we've had a great time working with him. We began working with them, like I said, back in November to put together this draft, and it is a draft. It's really a rough draft. There's typos in it and everything. So we're going to be taking input from the board and from everyone who reads it over the coming months. The deadline for this first round is November 2nd to get us edits, and then we'll do another version and as many as we need to do. So that's where we're at, definitely a draft. And I'm going to pass it over to Jeff Kellogg to talk about it. I think I should probably push a button here. There you go.
Oh, thank you, Cousin Lindsay. No. The ironic thing, though, is that the founding of our company, Mike Moss, has 3 daughters. His middle daughter, Lindsay Moss, who went to UC Santa Barbara with Lindsay Moss. And so lived in the same dorm, and so the reason all this is that I send emails, and suddenly I get an email back from Lindsay Moss ours and saying, I think this is supposed to go to somebody else, Jeff. And so anyways, but that was always our disclaimer. I think I even put it in there about there's no relationship whatsoever. So the reason I put this up there, this is not a paid commercial, even though it sounds like it, but the reason I do this now is one time I spoke before a board, and I like speaking to boards. The person, after I finished, they looked at me and they said, "Who are you?" And so for that reason only, I put this up here. Pretty straightforward. Mike Moss started the company. He was my mentor. He hired me. There's actually some interesting stories with that as well. But we are an employee-owned company. We're actually a Meeby Weeby. We are a female-owned company as well. So I know who to hang around, trust me. But we've been around, and we really do specialize on community colleges. That's what I do. And so I just wanted to put that out there. Mike Moss, as I mentioned, when he did hire me 12 years ago, he said to me at that time, he goes, you have 60% of what I need, I'll teach you the other 40%. He passed away a few years ago without ever telling me what that 60% I had was, but nonetheless, I've loved every minute of it working with colleges on this area. So this is a little more detailed. I do have a tie to, I know, I put that one up there purposely. If there's anything for your superintendent president, we do have a relationship there as far as the University of Oregon, go Ducks. The reason I put that second bullet is because whenever I deal with academic senates, an individual from an academic senate came up to me after it was a good meeting, but it was a tough meeting. And the person said, yeah, this must be the toughest group of people you ever dealt with. I was raised in the family business, oil industry, graduated from University of Oregon in June. In July, I was working as a manual laborer in Bakersfield, California. That's a reality check right there in itself. So I told the person that, no, you want a tough person? Deal with a 6'5", 275-pound Midwesterner who's got a really, really short fuse for a temper, usually hungover also, and also carrying a large caliber handgun. That's a tough person to deal with. You are not. So, but I did get into the educational planning. I've been doing it for 12 years actually now. I was a community college trustee for 16 years, loved every bit of it. And I also was a city council member for 12 years as well, and that's what we're asking about. Just to put in perspective, I was the youngest elected member at the time in Long Beach, so you're looking at what you may be like in about 30 years, and I'm sorry to give you that reality check right there, but nonetheless. So now you know a little bit about Jeff Kellogg, more than you ever want to know. More importantly, what we'll be discussing, very, very briefly, sensitive to your time, but as was mentioned, this is the draft, and if you don't believe me, look on every page of it, and it'll say draft. But it is a document that we're just beginning this reviewing, and we'll talk a little bit about the trustee's role, but more importantly, we're going to get into the actual plan and talk about what's there, what's not there, and sort of the frequent asked questions. That's really the important part of this here tonight. Thank you to people that have responded already to the draft with some suggestions and comments, because it really is, at the end of the day, this is your plan, and it is, and we'll show some reasons why that, because with all the information we have going into this document, I'm biased. I think it's going to really help you for the future, but that's for you to determine. For people that, when I used to do a lot of seminars at CCLC and other statewide organizations, national organizations, I would use videos a lot to get a point across. It also allows me to look at my notes to see where I am in the process. So I do those purposely, and those are also a little generational for people that know the movies. My kids look at those and go, who is that? So it's tough sometimes, but the point of that was essentially the one thing you're going to have to figure out, what your role is. We all know the roles and responsibilities for trustees and what you do need to really accomplish, but I would tell you the opinion that I have when we're at this point with the Facility Master Plan, your role is really going to be, because most of the documentation that is in this document is existing information with the college. There's nothing new. We don't sit there and say that we're going to build something that is really inappropriate. We don't make those type of recommendations. That's not the intent of this, but it's really to gather, and we'll go into more details when we talk about the actual plan, why we got to this type of plan. But your role is really going to be, when you take this, what's going to be the next step? How do you start to implement a lot of the suggestions, recommendations we have in this document? And that really becomes your debate, your discussion. And so that's really your primary role. I put this down only because when we were going through this document, many people can probably agree with this, that there is a great comment I heard one time. In the California Community College system, there is a policy and procedure for everything we do, everything. And if they haven't come up with one, they will. Planning is it's an important component, it's a critical component, it's required in more times than not, but it also, if you're not careful, will cause planning fatigue. So that's why this document, we tried to take a little bit of that burden off of the people that traditionally have to do a lot of these things. But if you just look at this, and I just touched on the easy ones, that's a lot of work right there, and that goes on year in and year out at a community college. And so I just wanted to sort of get your mind around that as well. This is an important document. It's critical in your overall integrated planning process because good planning does work. It really does. And this is one thing I always emphasize to people. This plan is part of that. If you follow and do the planning the way it's set up with shared governance, others, usually by the time you're through with it, you've got buy-in. You may have people that disagree, but you have a general conceptual agreement to what's going on. It does work. And I guess I just have to say, take a leap of faith and trust me on that one. I'll just give you the example of how things don't work. And that usually goes back to unstable leadership. That's a bad word, not unstable leadership, not consistent leadership. And that's where I was at a community college in Northern California, and I was walking through the campus and I was looking around, and of all the places, I couldn't understand why they had palm trees. It just did not fit. The answer was that they had a lot of different leadership changes, and one of the leaders that stepped into that chair at one point in time, they liked palm trees. They didn't follow good plans, so that was to me just a visual about follow good planning like we're doing right here, get it under order, and it will work. So now we're to and you notice that big draft, but now we're to the point where I'm going to turn it back over to Lindsay, and we're going to sort of both work on this one as well, on what this document actually is, questions you might have, and if you have questions, I don't know, we want to wait till we're done with the questions, but I'm going to turn it over to her right now, then I'm going to come back and talk about some things of what is and what isn't. Or do you want me to hit that first, or you want to take that one?
What is it first, and we'll have them be questions at the end.
I just, and this is very briefly, if you have followed integrated planning and all the things that go with it, this document I can show you, and I did at a prior meeting, where I would show you a facility master plan that's the size of a Los Angeles County phone book. That, again, is now generational because most people don't even know what a phone book is. So I just say it's about that thick. It has everything in the world in there, from inspections and so on. It also, to put it in a little bit more of dollars and cents, it's about $250,000 to $1 million to do a plan like that. This is not that plan. This plan was to help the college, once again, get into an integrated planning process and procedures and pull all the data that was out there and get it into this document so now you have a point to start and move forward with. That's really the essential of what this plan is. There's no surprises. There's a lot of clarification. So that's what it is. What it isn't is a large-scale, detailed, to where you have everything from soil samples. You have people that actually are walking detailed through each building, talking about everything in the world. But those are very expensive and they're very timely. And really, when I sat down and actually with Vice President Moss talked about this, it was, what are you trying to do here? Because I can tell you what we can or can't do, but nobody wants to waste your money. And that's why this document is pretty much straight on, bare bones in many ways, but it meets the needs of what you want at this point in time. And from here, you move forward. So that's essentially the overview, and I'll let you take it from there, and I'll come back in later.
So I just want to spend a minute kind of talking about the actual document. I'm sure you've all pored over every page of it, right? You read it all word for word and found all of our typos. So kind of the main part of the document is 1 or 2 pages on each of our core buildings, just so we're all aware of what's going on with each of our buildings. So we've got a page on the admin building, a page on the PE building, et cetera. So that kind of starts at the beginning of the document and goes, I don't know, 20 or so pages through the document, just trying to explain the square footage of the building, when was the building built, when was it remodeled, and what the deficiencies were of the buildings. And I think Moss Companies did a really good job of citing where that information is coming from, but a lot of the information, if we just talk about a core building page, I just flipped to the PE building on page 26, the infrastructure information and the deficiencies that are listed, that came from an analysis done by Moss Companies. They had part of their team come and sit with Rob for, I don't know, a long time and go through the buildings and list everything and do a matrix that's listed in the appendix of the assessment of all of the buildings. We also have previous documents that we use that are really detailed assessments of our buildings as well to help pull in this information. And another piece of critical information for each building that was included came from the Fusion report. I have it handy. I think some of you might remember us talking about this not too long ago because we just got it, which is really fantastic timing, that the Foundation for California Community Colleges just came and did this audit for us. They don't usually do it every year, they do it every few years, and they happen to just update it for us, so it's perfect timing that we have really up-to-date information. They spent a lot of time coming and looking at every single building and assessing all the deficiencies. So those are listed on usually the second page for each of these core buildings. It lists the deficiencies, and those are coming from the Fusion report. And as well as the deficiencies, it also lists the current repair cost and the current and the replacement cost. We talked about this a little bit before when we were discussing the PE building and our 5-year construction plan. So I'm getting into the weeds a little bit here, but I think it's important to explain that FCI percentage. We talked about that before as well. So when we're looking at these buildings, what the Fusion report does and what a common metric is used is this FCI percentage. And what they do is they say, okay, the building is going to cost $10,000 for you sorry, not thousand, I meant million. Nothing costs $10,000 to replace, wouldn't that be nice? $10 million to replace a building and $5 million to repair it. And they're saying that's repairing everything. That's bringing everything back up to speed. Maybe it needs everything down to new paint, new carpet, and interior HVAC systems, et cetera, electrical, it's everything. So when they say that the building is $10 million to replace it or $5 million to repair it, they just do a ratio, 5 million into 10 million. That means that you have a 50% FCI or facility cost index. And when you have a 50% FCI, you think about it, that's kind of bad. The higher the percentages, the worse it is, right? So if your building costs you $9 million to repair and it's $10 million to have a whole new building, you've got a 90% FCI. That's really at the extreme end. But to give you an idea that the higher the number, the worse it is. Kind of the standard is that if you have a 50% FCI, you should modernize the building. You should remodel it. You shouldn't just go in and repair each and every item. It's not cost effective. It might be cheaper just to remodel it than to go in and fix everything. And then when you get into the 70-80% FCI, you should probably replace the building and not bother repairing it. The cost of repairs has just grown too high. So that's really important to understand that piece of each of these building assessments and the FCI, and that's why we have that listed there, because unfortunately a lot of our buildings are in the higher ranges, 50%, et cetera. Okay. What else? Then the document goes into talking about our vehicular circulation, pedestrian circulation, shot and wake, of course, we address as well. They're an important part of our campus overall, and we need to plan different changes that we want to have out there. There's a lot of portable buildings at main campus, shot and wake, that we want to make sure we are planning long range how we're going to use those buildings and if we want to do something more permanent with them. So we go through all of that. And then we get into a recommendations section near the end, before all the appendix, but near the end on page 73. And that's where Moss has gone through and list each of the buildings and the deficiencies they have. And this section, even as I'm reading it, I'm going, okay, we can add a little more to the section, kind of describing what are these recommendations, and that's something we need to get input from everyone on of, what are we looking to do with these different buildings that have all these deficiencies or kind of have a high cost of repair at this point in time because of their age and the deferred maintenance on them. And then we, of course, go into parking lots, and accessibility is important. Wayfinding, infrastructure, and sustainability are all different pieces of the FMP that we have outlined here because we have issues in all of those different areas. I think that was about all I wanted to highlight on the actual plan. Yeah, I think that was it. So I'll let Jeff go finish up, and then we'll have you time for questions.
So in the actual document, these are questions, and these aren't the only questions, but I just try to put some down to really generate some comments, questions from you, perhaps. One that's not on there that I haven't heard yet, and that is the deadline that we were trying to do is November 2nd for getting all the edits and comments. They're going to come to me or Lindsay. If they come to me, I'm going to copy her as well. I have received some of your comments already. Thank you very much, because that, again, is your document. So November 2nd, that is before we go out to the community and have a discussion. We want the document to be more edited at that point in time. So that is the deadline. The questions also with this and some of the things with facility master plan. When I originally was supposed to do this presentation, it was more of a workshop on integrated planning overall. So I'm going to incorporate some of those questions. That was when I think I was a kid, because all the delays I've had getting back up here. It's the educational master plan drives the facility master plan. In general, when people ask, what's the difference between a strategic plan and an educational master plan, for example? Strategic plan is blue sky. What do you want to be in life? What do you want to be as a college? An educational master plan is based on data, your program instruction. If I pulled out, again, a little, instead of online, your classes, and I say, is this what you teach here? This is your program instruction. This is who you are. Student services, this is who you are. That then, from that document, you do things that drives into your facility master plan, that what you're going to need somewhere in the future, maybe 5 years, maybe 25 years, but when your college looks a certain way, you're going to need certain type of facilities to address those student services and programs instruction. That's my simplest way of explaining the integrated planning with facility master plan, educational master plans. As far as why isn't a facility master plan needed? It's in the Ed Code. That's a simple way, but then again, everything is in the Ed Code. But nonetheless, you're required to have an educational master plan and a facility master plan. They tell you need to have one, but they don't tell you what has to be in it. So it's all open after that. And you can see that with all the different ed plans, facility master plans throughout the state. But it is required. You can review it and update it whenever you feel it's appropriate. I went back, and when Lindsay and I first started, the last full-blown, and that was a very elaborate facility master plan, and it wasn't digitally, because I had to look at the hard copy, because in 1975 there was no such thing as digital, and that was the original facility master plan for this college. It was updated in 1984, and then there was a lot of other documents that started to come in place that certainly represented a facility master plan, but wasn't directly called the facility master plan. I got an education in this because when someone would turn to me and say, what about PLUMP? And I would go, what's PLUMP? So this document, we've taken all of those to put it into this facility master plan. So if somebody looks at this document, they can now find some historical perspective on what has been going on. That includes a lot of other items that we put in there. Again, you can do whatever you want with this document. The bigger and more important is where you're going from here. So as far as I touched on what's in here, what's not, and also what now, well, when you finally approve it, again, that's going to be more of your, how do you want to try to implement some of these recommendations with this facility master plan. So your integrated planning now is a little more complete. It's something you can move forward, and this is a base. Whenever you feel appropriate to look at it again, usually it follows the 6-year accreditation cycle. That's usually, but not always, because to try and do all these documented updates within a 6-year period can be really challenging on a lot of people. So that is essentially, if you have some other questions, we can always try to answer those, but the biggest one I wanted to get across, it's a draft, but it's November 2nd. When we go out in the community, hopefully at that point in time, we'll have a clean document and one that the community can understand. Superintendent President Beebe, when we talked about this document, and I agree, you have to explain it in a way that the community can understand it. Too many times when you get a very elaborate document, you start talking about things that most people just can't get their arms around. I can't. And so that's the problem with thick documents. Also, documents that are the size of that infamous LA County phone book, they're usually good for one thing, that's to keep a door open. Not to be utilized. So there's a real challenge that when you have a final document to keep it simple and direct. So those are questions. If you have some more, we can answer in a bit, but then we have the infamous other meetings that are going on.
I just wanted to touch briefly on all the different meetings we do have going on and throw out some dates so everyone's aware. So we will be doing a campus-wide forum internally here on November 16th. We will also be doing an external, more community-focused wide forums on November 13th, November 14th, and November 15th. They're in this order at Schott, Wake, and the main campus. And we have those times out there, and we've got them at different times in the evening and in the morning in hopes that folks will be able to attend at least one of them, anyone who's interested. We also will be meeting with the City of Santa Barbara, of course, and the second district supervisor as well after these, and the Coastal Commission and other agencies. So we do have all of that planned out. Like I mentioned before, I've already met with a handful of committees on campus, and all those meetings will continue to be ongoing, and some of them I'll probably have to meet with twice, just as the drafts change. I've already met with ASG and Planning and Resources and a handful of groups. So, and our plan is to have this become finalized and approved by the board at the first meeting in December. So that's our plan. I think we have one more fun one.
The reason I put that slide in there, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, in case anyone wants to know what film that was, is that when I had the original timeline that we started, a long time ago in a far-off galaxy, it seems like, but nonetheless, I had to do a revision, and one of the things I put on there was something I had never put on a timeline before, natural disasters. And it took out essentially 2 to 3 months. And it was just And so when people ask me, what's the timeline, I would say, I don't know. And it was also, though, I'm so pleased that everything's nice with the weather, because when I came up here and when I left, suddenly the disaster started to happen. So I thought, well, is it me or something else? So nonetheless, the timeline is moving forward. It has been a challenge in the way, but the way the college responded to it is pretty amazing. Actually, I think there was, with the Community College League of California, they were talking about dealing with natural disasters. And this college was one, Santa Rosa as well. I mean, these tragedies that you deal with, and suddenly you're doing things you never thought you would be taking and relocating a school onto your campus, et cetera, et cetera. So it's pretty amazing. But so the timeline, we knew we were going to move forward, and we finally got there. So it really now is the questions, and if you have any, I do want to say, and this is just thank you for taking part of it all. This is my opportunity to always say something as a consultant working for community colleges. I have been on many colleges through the 12 years. I love doing it, but I also realize that I am a blue suit. I'm a consultant. I'm a high-priced consultant. I'm why we have that idiot, all those above. And it's always a challenge, but I have to say that first off, that video at the very beginning, we did that. That is, you can take that video and do whatever you want with it. We actually had a pilot that did that for us months ago. But I do that also because, seriously, you have issues here. I looked at that video and go, they can't possibly have issues here. But knowing the fact that, so my thanks to the college on all their hard work, because again, many times as a consultant, you can be thrown under the bus very quickly. A lot of issues can come up. And I have to say my personal thanks to Vice President Moss and to, I don't know what Rob Morales' title is this week. It was Director of Facilities. It may have moved. I don't know. He had a lot during the timeline. But I just have to thank everyone here at the college, Alexandra, who wasn't pregnant when I started here, but now she's due in December. But all the people here have been tremendous, and I always like to stand up and say that as an outsider coming in, especially for board members. Many times you have people that come to these microphones and tell you how bad things are and how difficult it is, but I have to tell you how much I appreciate the hard work. and the dedication of Vice President Moss and also your Director of Facilities, Rob Morales. It's been a pleasure working with them. It's fun. I don't have to say this. I've already been paid, so I can. But nonetheless, it's been a real pleasure to work here at Santa Barbara City College. You have great people. And the issues, as a former president of a college one time turned to me and said, Jeff, never has so much been talked about something that's so small and minor. And I go, well, that's interesting. But so I do want to say the thanks to that, and also to Superintendent President Beebe, who I actually, when I was on the board at Long Beach City College, when we were going through, knowing we were about ready to lose our superintendent president, I talked to him. I said, I think I have a short list of people we could hire. And then he goes and comes up here. So it took it off the list real quick. But and I'm not saying this because he's a duck, but I've always had great admiration for him, how he handles situations from the day he's been in San Diego and including here. And he's always been a pleasure professional to work with. And you're very fortunate, as we all know, that being CEOs at community colleges is very challenging. And that's why the tenure is so short. As I say, the fun factor is almost not there. So. Nonetheless, I want my appreciation to everyone here, their hard work and what they've done. And I've seen it across the board. So you really, it helps to have good, strong, stable leadership. And that also helps the board. So I always like to tell people thank you, because too many times people don't say it. But I didn't have to say it, but I wanted to, just to, you have some great things going here. By the way, only because at the very beginning, this is again my great pride. But when you talk about the College Promise and the foundation here at Santa Barbara is the envy of most community colleges in the state of California. We always would look and go, why do they have all those things? And it is one of those great things. Now, I will say at Long Beach, we've dealt with $1 million a year on scholarships, our foundation there in Long Beach. And also the College Promise started in Long Beach in 2008. It actually started before then. And I remember how challenging that was to get that moving forward. And then they also talked about some of those assembly bills, including placement, and I remember how difficult that was. So there's always challenges, and so I always thank a board for your dedication to this system. It is one of the best systems in the world. And hopefully this plan will reflect well. And if you have questions, Lindsay would be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you for your kind words. And I do think Dr. Beebe has a page highlighted that maybe one, both, or all three of you can help us answer.
I would yield to any of the trustees.
I would just be curious to see how we're going to deal with this. Are we planning a study session devoted to this page by page so that we actually know what we're talking about?
It's a thin agenda, so we can try to get as much now, but I think the timeline is open to what you're suggesting for it.
I mean, I think we could go through this and do it in a pretty pro forma way, but I think I would really like to understand it page by page. So I think, I mean, if we have the time and the willingness, I'd like to request scheduling a study session so that we can just do that.
Yeah, sure, we could do that. That would make sense. There is something I wanted to spend a little bit of time on, if we could, and that's page 52. I don't know if Lindsay or Jeff wants to talk about this, but I think it's important, just as an overview, to understand the building prioritization.
Okay, everyone knows what it is, right? It's looking at it. I apologize that we can't bring it up on the board. I'll have to describe it to everyone else. Does Clyde oh, Clyde could bring it up, or Liz. We'll wait a second to get there. We're so technologically savvy, I forgot. 52, I don't know if it's the same number in there. We'll find out when we get there.
Oh, because PDF.
Building priorities, is that what you're
Keep
looking for?
3 more pages.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk
There you go.
briefly
Thank you.
about this. What does this mean? How does it work?
Yeah.
Just briefly.
Good question. What does it mean? So this has really been, I mean, to me, kind of a grassroots process of trying to figure out what do we want in this plan? And all of the work that we've been doing over the last 6 months with our discussion about our 5-year construction plan that the board approved in July, that just had the PE building and student services, and that was it. This topic came up, and this was actually, Rob and I created this in June when we were talking about that, because we all are, without having a current facility master plan in our hands and this done back when we were going through that process, all of us are like dying to know what is our plan? What are we doing with all of our core buildings, especially the ones that really need to have some kind of improvement done sooner than later? So we did some work just looking at this fusion assessment, looking at the FCI percentages that our buildings were rated at, and also using our own knowledge of which buildings we're having to have emergency repairs done to regularly or just having recurring issues, and an additional piece of which buildings do we have funding coming for already. So we decided just to create some categories. Red are the buildings that are having the most problems, that really we'd like to see some improvements done on quickly. And then yellow's, something in the middle. Either those buildings were modernized not too long ago, or they're not having a lot of issues. And then green, those are buildings that were just modernized or recently built. We're not expecting to need to do anything major with those. The yellow and the green those are kind of a ways out there. The priority order of those is, to me, not super critical that it stays in that kind of an order. Those are farther out. For me, the red section is the more critical of and again, this is a draft. I'm not saying this is what we have to have, but the red are the ones that I feel like we need to talk about first, of what the prioritization order of those would be, minus the sports pavilion, because we've already agreed that we're going forward with that right away. And then the student services building, we have in the queue at the state level to receive state funding for that. So that's why those are at the top. But the rest, it's something we can talk about. Kind of my vision for the campus with those, and why I feel like it's important to be talking about, say, replacing portables on Wake and Schott and here, and improving the other buildings as well. So.
Just a quick question in terms of making sure I understand this. Why is humanities 67% but in green, but student services 58%? I thought the higher the number, the worse.
It's true, yeah, and I even brought my report, and you've asked the same question that we got asked in PNR 2 days ago, which is great. That's humanities building. It was a complete remodel, but they didn't do everything. They left kind of the systems of the building, the ducting, the electrical, et cetera, and we continue to see issues with those systems. These are assessments done by this group. Maybe they picked up on something and rate it more heavily than kind of makes sense. So that's why we need to also take a step back and look at what we know about the buildings. So I wouldn't really rate it that high personally, but that's when they went and looked at all of the systems and the repairs that need done there. They think that the cost would be pretty high to replace all of that. So, but the details are in here if you're really dying to know exactly why they rated it that way.
So I'm thinking about the building prioritization, and what I hear you saying is that what you're looking at is the question of how serious the problems are with those buildings, and that's what's prioritizing it. And historically, that's now a completely different list from what we had that went through participatory governance leading up to the 2014 bond. And there were different factors, and that produced a different list. So my question really is, how does our college and our students feel about that? I mean, I get what you're saying. It makes sense to look objectively at the buildings and say these are the ones most in need of help. But at the same time, we had produced a very different list looking at other factors. So comparing those things, and the factor that perhaps leaps out to me is which of these buildings most impact our students. And I know that isn't just classrooms, but that leaps to mind. It's also, I think, student services, and we've been talking about that one. It seems to me that that's relevant to prioritizing in the big picture. So I'm wondering if there might be a couple of systems of prioritization that might be looked at for people to compare and contrast.
Yeah, So we have not met with all the groups yet, and some of them have just seen it kind of for a first time. So I haven't had a lot of interaction or feedback from anyone about that page. I think that your point is well taken of presenting it different ways, or surveying the students on what they're looking for, and we should look into doing that. And I'm open to ideas if you have some thoughts on how to show it different ways, like you were just describing. That's what we're here to do, right? Talk about input, talk about this, get feedback, and make sure that we're publishing something that we all believe in. We kind of had to get something in paper to start the dialogue. So yeah, whatever ideas you have, I think we could work on.
And following up on that, just for readability, you had mentioned above earlier that when you're at the 50% level of the FCI, then you're thinking remodel. When you get to 70 or 80%, you're thinking about replace. We're not even quite, we're close, but not at 70 or 80%. And I'm thinking for purposes of people understanding what we mean here, it would be helpful to say whether we intend or are thinking right now remodel or replace. Because I know, for example, Wake Center and Schott Center, there was a lot of concern about totally replacing Wake. And if what we're talking about is some sort of remodel, some sort of phased change in, I think it would alleviate people's concern about what do we mean right up front.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I was thinking about something related to that, and then you've added in a new piece of, I want to kind of add into this document what I just described, because it's not said anywhere, but I wanted to hear your input on what you thought about that, like adding a little section of what does this FCI mean. Typically with 50% you do this and 70% you do that. That, like I said, we're just literally adding to the draft still right now, and I wanted to hear what the board thought about that concept, because I was thinking about that as well, that maybe we need to clarify what that information means and what we're doing with it and how it's helping with the ranking. As for your comment about Wake, you're absolutely right. During the plump process, there was a proposal to do something dramatically different there. And with this document, we're really just trying to get on paper what we have right now. We're not talking about massive changes in enrollment with students. We're not proposing programmatic changes where we're going to start a whole new program that would require a brand new building, or a program that's growing so much that it would need a new building or some specialized facilities. We're not proposing any of that because we don't have that anywhere else in our EMP or in our plans. So we should talk more about Wake specifically. As you can see in this is kind of just a start. Just a start to what would we want to be talking about for major changes to Wake, but we're not proposing anything like that in here right now. Some things I have concerns about are the portable buildings at Wake and Schott. They're quite old, not the best learning environment. I've taken a handful of classes in them myself. Do we want to incorporate some kind of change to those two campuses with those portables? Put in something permanent that replaces those. But yeah, we should talk about it.
Yeah. I think it would be helpful to explain the FCI and maybe the even if you say likely remodel or something like that, I think that makes people feel like they know where they're standing and what they're looking at.
That's exactly what I was thinking. The recommendation section, I feel like it needs a little more clear recommendation, because we kind of describe the deficiencies, but maybe we need to say, we think this building needs to be replaced or modernized, or something more clear. So I totally agree. I was just emailing Jeff about that last night.
In terms of the community forums, how are those going to be structured to get feedback from the community, and how can the trustees be involved in getting the community members we are connected with to engage? / is there something, if people can't make it, like a remote input testimony system?
I am sure that my wonderful colleague in the Office of Communications is going to help me figure all of that out.
Okay.
And we'll make sure. That's important. It's very important to us that we get feedback.
And Luce has been thinking about how we can go about doing that. It might be a combination of using technology and some other things for feedback, but there's a way to do that. I do just want to comment on Dr. Haslam's suggestion about going through this in much greater detail. And I think that is totally appropriate, and we need to do that. what I'd like to suggest is that we schedule a half-day retreat to be able to do that, and be able to kind of walk through this whole thing, get into some of these definitions a little deeper. Some other suggestions that may not even be in the plan itself, maybe buildings, other things that we could talk about. But we need some time.
Sure. I had just a clarification. Is there someplace in this document where there's a list of acronyms so that we, okay.
In the very back, there's a glossary.
Okay, good.
Yeah, a glossary and acronyms. And I'm not a huge fan of acronyms myself.
I would assume
So
that there
we try
is.
not to put too many in there.
Back to Jonathan's point of looking at some of these FCI numbers, the point of which is to indicate the degree to which one building should be repaired or replaced or so forth. I think it would be helpful to know how those numbers were developed, because at the moment when you see, for example, the drama music building, which we completed in 2010, have at a substantial cost, being having a 51% number, that gives the impression that well, it's not confidence building in the process, and so I'd like a little more information about that at some point, and I suspect that anybody looking at this document with a critical eye would want the same thing.
I would agree.
A couple responses, starting with the document itself. The majority of information in this document has already come across your desk: 5-year plan, IPP, FPPs, former documents, including this fusion report. So when you want to review it, I would just start with, when you look at it, there's some general questions you might have, because a lot of the documentation has already been through the shared governance process. That's why this facility master plan for your college is somewhat different than others, where they go into very elaborate, to your point about the FCI, and I don't get too locked down on those numbers, because that is an individual hired by the state of California to go through and give his assessment or her assessment of what the structure is or isn't. So if you get to another level where you do a full-blown facility master plan, where you have experts coming in and looking at everything, that's a different type of scenario. We took the existing information that has already gone through and tried not to duplicate in cost. So the point is that when you want to review this document, first look through it and see if there's things that are glaring to you that you have a question about. Those are really what you want to do, because a lot of the items in here you've approved. So that's number one. The terminology, thank you, because community colleges talk in a different language sometimes. For example, you'll see COMET, C-O-M-E-T. I have no idea exactly what that is, but that is a software program embedded in Fusion, Facility Utilization, FU, Space Inventory Operating Network, Fusion. So there's a lot of terminology we use that most people in the community are going to look at you and wonder, what in the world? So when we go out to the community, we try to tell them about more the integrated planning process that community colleges really address, which is unique in many ways. But it's not like where there's suddenly going to be a skyscraper or something. That's not what this document is. If there is a large group of people at these community meetings, my history, that means there is a real problem out there, or there's some misinformation out there. But generally, these are fairly benign meetings. They really are. But it is a great opportunity to let people in the community know where you're going as a college, and that's really more valuable than anything else. The details of what the buildings are going to look like in the future, again, going back to a question, if the document traditionally with the educational master plan is going to tell you, and I apologize, now I'm really going to get in the weeds just very quickly, then I'm going to get out of the weeds, but your space on what you're going to get funded for in the future per the old funding mechanism is very rigid. It is based on your program of instruction. It's a formula. It will say you have this much square footage in these 5 categories called TOPS, taxonomy of programs. I love all these terms. And that's how you get funding for space. You may say, I want to build something, but the state of California may turn around and say, you're already over the expectations of that category. We will not give you funding for that. And if you build it, and you want to try and turn the lights on, put the carpet in, or put people in there, we won't fund you for it. That's the old funding mechanism, which we didn't really talk about, with the new funding formula, which is a little bit of a change. But nonetheless, all those factors come into this whole process. So there are really good questions, and that's where I'm going to get back out of the weeds. But the facility master plan is really just to give some where this college will be facilities-wise and how the process goes. And more times than not, they usually are fairly easy meetings. I say that because maybe just being an optimist. But hopefully it's a good opportunity to let people know what the college is doing. That's always a good opportunity. So as far as the building priority, and actually Vice President Moss sent me an email about, Jeff, the recommendations aren't strong enough. And so we're going to do some language change on that. Right after this slide, you're going to see another one in the next draft about funding options, best funding options. And then that gets back to all of you. How do you want to pursue it? And there's limited options available to California community colleges. Not an informational or fun fact, but it's reality. The fact to get state funding right now, there is probably, I last quit looking, the number of projects for the 115, now 115 California community colleges, was hundreds of projects waiting to get funded. The last budget, they agreed to do 19 projects. The governor was not a big fan of future debt, so I think he awarded 5. Just think about how that list keeps getting longer and longer. So if you want to queue up and get your funding, and that's how colleges did it in the past from the 1960 master plan, that world's changed on us all. So if you really want to address deferred maintenance, things like that, you're going to have to look at some other options. And that's what we'll talk about in there, because that's a good question. The document should be easy to follow, and that was our main point. So hopefully I didn't take you into the weeds too much on that one. I apologize.
No, it's good. That Peter's comment and then Lindsay, you guys' comments remind me. So it's Eric Middleton. He went through this, and it was late, very late one evening. So that is on video. I'm sure we could find the snippet and sort of, but it was that formula of like, where did this ratings come from? Where did this number come from? And it was late, and so I don't know how much all of us remember the math.
Obviously, nothing
Okay, well, good thing it's on tape.
in my case. And what I'm hearing is that it's not a precise process that we should be willing to trust, which gives rise to, why is it here? I mean, that's maybe a whole nother conversation that we should have at another point.
Well, when you say this document hopefully will give you a starting point now that you can work from moving forward. There's a lot of things that happened during this process that I was asking about traditionally, and you'll see in the recommendations what traditionally is an educational master plan that helps me determine facilities. But you really weren't as a college at that point, and you had so many other documents that we were pulling from. So this is as far as a document that gives everyone an easy way to see where we've been, what you've done, and you've done a lot. It's just now you have it in one document that you can move forward with. So that should really help you as far as legitimize the questions they might have. And then from this point forward, it really is going to be up to the governing board to what steps do we want to consider. And then what issues do we want to address as far as the facilities. So, and I could talk on those as well as far as options and how you look at different funding. But I think the document in itself it's a simple, straightforward document. Hopefully that helps you.
Thank you.
One more thought. I hear you saying that we really need to get to the end of having this document, and I recognize that. But there's a couple of issues that strike me that, and they might be handled in a way that just says to be developed in the future, to be discussed in the future, that kind of thing. It doesn't necessarily, because I think maybe the last thing you want to hear about is more data that you should be thinking about. But two things I'm thinking about. One is the change in the funding formula and how that will impact or may impact down the road what will be built or remodeled. And the other is we're hearing recent reports and reports before that about climate change, which includes both increasing temperature, which might, we have at least one building with no actual air conditioning. That could mean that that's a higher priority because of climate change. And the city of Santa Barbara has been doing a lot of work, and they have maps that would indicate that in 30 years, they're predicting that our football field is the beach and the ocean is there. So these are things, it strikes me as something that we should be looking at in that future range. Are we seeing the impacts of climate change on our campus? Are we thinking about that? And I'm not asking you to do that in this document so much as that maybe we identify some of these things for future thought.
And I'll just go back to my planning slide that I had for you. Planning cycles in community college system is ongoing. It never ends. It's a circular every 6 years. It's the way it is. And then you get into program reviews and so on and so forth. So that's part of the beauty of this system, but also to many people, that's planning fatigue. But in that, a lot of those comments you said are incorporated in the discussion. And I use this example all the time. 15, 20 years ago, when you were talking about buildings like this, you never ever heard the term active shooter. That was not a term anyone used. How do you secure a building? Well, that now has come into facilities and well, and how you make the safety, how you get notification. So to the point with even like climate change, those are things that happen. The bigger question is on the, with the new funding formula, that does change things, but in many ways, but at the same time, the amount of work that community colleges need and the funding that goes into making those improvements for community colleges, we compete in the state of California with every other project. We compete with a bullet train. We compete with everything that you have funding. And that makes it really difficult to try and get it all together, to get the funding, to get the things we need. But those are questions that are ongoing. And that's why I mean it's, I like planning, obviously. I strongly suggest you never bring it up at a social hour because no one else is probably going to be very excited about it unless you're in the room with me. But it is something ongoing. And those questions are there. But as far as with the funding formula for facilities, that is somewhat involved, but not entirely, because it still is based on growth, majority. Now, they've made some changes, and I'm not surprised at all. I would just share with you, Eloy Oakley always had an issue with the growth formula. And if anyone even knows, there's only a handful of community colleges in the state of California that still has growth. And that's what we're based on, only a few. Everyone else is, well, stabilization, the highest level ever. So it's a real challenge on how we make these facilities for what we do. So so those are ongoing questions, and they will obviously be discussed in the future.
Dr. Beebe, my question's more on that note of a 6-year cyclical cycle that we're in, and maybe Dr. Ralston. So are we looking at the Educational Master Plan in 2020, or is that, like, this is basically, since the EMP drives the Facilities Master Plan, what we have now, we can confidently say is what we will have for a few years?
Well, the Educational Master Plan needs to be redone. We need to rethink that. I mean, our vision for how we're looking at enrollment, the efficiencies, we're not looking at growing. Some of those kinds of things, the new funding formula, all of those have to be incorporated in a new educational master plan. We're we are backwards in how this works. And Jeff's pointed this out to us multiple times that we really should be starting with the educational master plan first, so we can look at what kind of facilities we need, and then from that you can develop a facilities master plan. But be that as it may, we'll be moving forward developing a new educational master plan, and, along with a strategic plan and some other things. You know, at some point we're looking to have an updated suite of all of these plans that are up there, that are integrated. We have them, we do things, and we just don't necessarily have all of these documented in a way that shows kind of what we're trying to do with that. Do you want to add to that, Dr. Ralston? Yeah, we can't hear you.
And just as Pamela's coming down here, you're not alone. It happens. Your facility master plan was done so long ago. Your educational master plan was done 5 years ago.
2014.
So it's pick which one, so it's not unusual. It just means sometimes I have to back into a plan instead of driving a plan. So you're not alone, it happens, and we deal with that. But that is really why. The education master plan, again, you have an educational master plan, and that's, so you can look at it that way. But after that, there were certain questions that I had, and we made it work. It's all right.
Thanks. So there are lots of different ways to go about educational master planning, and some of that has been on a different kind of trend cycle over the last few years. And so the last version of our educational master plan had some immediate kind of initiative-driven approaches as well as kind of a philosophical approach. And so one of the things that you can hear somebody like Mr. Kellogg really speak to is this idea that these things are really linked on a pragmatic operational level. And that's a really solid, good approach. So we are not without the tools to be able to do that work, and so getting started and kind of refreshing this has been really important. We are in some unusual circumstances with a downturn in enrollment, limited geographical space. So when we think about something like a facilities master plan, we have to be doing kind of two levels of thought. And so one of the things that I would always want to stress about a facilities master plan is it is a 30,000-foot look in a lot of different ways. So we're thinking about a 20-year plan. That 5-year plan that you approved in June is really a practical approach to thinking about where we are most immediately. And then I would also kind of caution about the idea of whether or not we have a list of things that we're thinking about replacement or removal when we're thinking about the timeline that we're looking at. So if you think about how facilities will be aging out over the course of time in this plan, it's really important for us to be thinking about them right now in this set of order, because our funding mechanism that we use might really determine what we're able to knock out quickly. So were we in a bond environment, we might be thinking about a 6-year timeline to be able to remove 3 to 4 buildings and replace them. If we're working on state funding over time, this will age out and those numbers will continue to shift. And so this idea of thinking about it in a red, yellow, green format is actually a really good way to be approaching this. It's a composite look at our areas that are the most important for us to be considering. And so as we work through this draft process and I get an opportunity to work with Lindsay on this, those are things that I would be emphasizing. So this is a list that if you're thinking about what is, the educational master planning component that keeps coming into this and as it's ongoing is what will be. And those are questions that we're continuing to raise. And in a way, we're fortunate that we're not 2 years into an educational master plan that predated the student-centered funding formula and our enrollment dip. We're actually really prized in the next 2 years to consider what this looks like as we go forward. We're in what's going to be a pretty transitional period. And so 2 years from now, we'll have a pretty solid understanding of what that funding looks like and what our students look like as we move into this. We know now a lot of things that we wouldn't have done 5 years ago, which is we need a lot more student swing space. We need to accommodate students in kind of innovative learning environments that accommodate a lot more tutoring. The way we would have approached a lecture hall would have been really different 7 years ago. And so this feels awkward and difficult because we don't have a lot of definitive answers, but what we have not done is made a series of errors that we can't undo. And so right now, as we move into this next period, this is actually a really prime time to be thinking about facilities master planning at the term of thinking through what is a high priority. But we're going to need new buildings that come on that do things a little more innovatively. And so this idea about is it replacement or removal is actually really crucial to us. And that should be kind of short-term thinking, mid-term thinking, and then longer-term thinking. Facilities master planning should be done more often than 1976 with an update in 1984, but it really is kind of long-term thinking, and then you need to have these moments where you step in and figure out operationally what are we doing in the next 5, really pretty quickly.
And there's some buildings that aren't up here that I would like to spend some time on talking about, not now, but at a retreat where we can really kind of get into it. I have 3 or 4 different potential building ideas that, like I say, are not here. And those need to be incorporated into the plan as well.
Very good answer, explanation, thoughts, yes. So I guess for us then, what would be your recommendation for us knowing that, so we know education master plan and then facility master plan, and so how can we, because we're going to ask the questions, you're going to wonder all these different numbers, but we also want to work in tandem with you guys, obviously, because there's so much work being done here. I mean, off the top, I mean, when I see Sports Pavilion, the first thing that came to my mind was, oh, associate degree for transfer. You can't get associate degree for transfer without taking a PE course. So if they can't have a facility to take a PE course, we're not getting an associate degree to transfer, you know? So that tied me back to educational master plan. And that's huge. And we were one of the few community colleges that have, you know, the associate degree for transfer. And anyway, that's sort of where my mind goes. So I want to support this as much as I can. At the same time, we're doing our due diligence to, you know, ask the questions and figure this stuff out, and not get in the way, but support the work, if that makes sense.
It does.
So in the meantime, yeah, what would you recommend for us?
So this was just meant to be a high-level overview of the plan itself. Now we have an opportunity to spend some time to really get into the meat of it in a half-day retreat or whatever we need. And so we'll schedule that and then see how you all feel after you get done with that retreat.
Okay.
That'd be my recommendation, move forward that way.
And then in the meantime, I mean, would it be beneficial to go back as, you know, it was noted, a lot of this stuff has come through the board and many times we just don't remember, we don't, you know, would it be appropriate to, is there some things, Lindsay, if you felt like, you know what, maybe they should review this, because it'll help, you know, activate some background knowledge on some information, or do you feel like just come clean slate and we'll be ready? Because I mean, I don't intend to understand all of Mr. Middleton's formula, but I can go at it and, you know, go and see.
Yeah, I do think reviewing that board meeting and watching it one more time where he presented,
Okay.
I mean, all these documents we have, I don't think they would be particularly helpful to have at, you know, the top of your memory. I think it's more, these are the discussions that we've all been kind of waiting to have. All that planning we did with the PE building in the last 5-year plan, now we're able to talk about everything else. So I think it's going to be more organic of what's on the top of the board members' minds and what we think we should be doing. Plump could be a good thing to review if you have any Plump documentation. That might be one good one, because that's what the community was aware of before. So it'd be good to assess, and a lot of information was provided to us via Plump. So I could try and make sure you have that handy if you need it.
Well, it should be all online. I can, we can work with Angie and she'll help us. I have them all in papers too. Post-its, like old school, just regular paper and Post-its.
The document is really meaty, but there was some PowerPoints that were easy to digest.
And they're online still, that's good. Thank you, Dr. Ralston. That was good. Do you guys have any other thoughts? No?
My question is, if we wanted to do a half-day retreat, when would we want to time that? Before community input, after, pretty soon?
I'd say sooner rather than later. Yeah, I'd say the next couple of weeks if possible.
What'd you say?
The next couple of weeks if we can.
If I can be so bold, I would recommend before the community meetings, which is November 13th, 14th, and 15th.
First week in November, by the first week.
If we can fit it in.
Well, I must say, when this agenda item posted, Trustee Bloom, I couldn't help but think of you and just how much this has been, you know, that you always reminded us of this, of the importance of this plan, and make sure that we don't forget this plan. And so, thank you.
Yep. Very much so.
Okay. Will that end our discussion? Everybody's very pensive. You're not tired because it's only 5:35.
Well, just one more comment that is brought on by what you just suggested. My suggestion for a time to review it in greater depth, I think, is valid, but it shouldn't be interpreted as wanting to hold up any sort of progress. I mean, if we need to review this in order to understand it after the fact, if you have deadlines, I don't want us to mess with those deadlines. Does that make sense?
Mother Nature has messed with my deadlines, so we're not going to do anything in my deadlines.
Well, we're not a force of nature. We're just, 7 people here.
I just think if you look at the document, if you have comments, questions about it, I think that will drive to the next step. And because again, it's something that the board hasn't even had. None of you have been around living, I think, in certain cases, the last facility master plan. So look at it, Again, you're not alone. It's integrated planning, and see what comes out of after the review. But this document, it does not have anything controversial, and well, I shouldn't say that, but it has at least now. It gives you that starting point where you go from here. And yeah, you just want to keep moving forward at the same time. That's what I would just suggest. You want to keep moving forward, but always ask the questions. No one rubber stamps anything. So, but at least it gets you in a point in time that now you can move forward, hopefully.
Thank you.
The Incredibles, did you watch that scene from The Incredibles? You should put that in the end of your thing. The clip from The Incredibles where he's like, keep moving forward.
Well,
Okay, I have little children, so yes.
thank you all very much.
Thank
for the,
you. Okay, guys, well, I guess that ends our discussion. Thank you, Dr. Beebe and Angie, for putting all this together and bringing it to us. Item 7.1, we have now an opportunity to hear and get an update from our ad hoc committee. It's all you guys.
Shall I start? I think we've had now 4 sessions of 2 hours each, and we began by telling anybody who'd like to come in that we're there to listen and to listen carefully, to inquire where that was appropriate. We're mindful of keeping our nose out of operational stuff. Sometimes operational stuff is presented, and we're grateful. We're grateful for any information or any ideas, and but most of the time we spend together just listening to what people have to say. And today was significant in that nobody came. We had a great time talking to each other, but at least we were there. And I think the main press of this at the end of the day may be that we are just accessible to people who'd like to have a conversation with us. There may or may not be policy implications. We're constantly honing in on that part of it. And so in that sense, the process of doing this may be as important as any product that we might come up with.
I would just add to that prior to the 4 meetings that Peter referred to are the open office hours that we have. And even before we got to that point, we had, I think, 3 organizational meetings to kind of figure out what we're going to do. And I think we're happy with the process of the open office hours. I think it's illuminating. We're hearing things that I think perhaps we didn't expect to hear, and we're hoping that people will continue to come see us. We didn't have an actual campus-wide announcement until a few days ago. I think this week. I don't remember now. So the word may not be as widespread yet as we would like, but it is out there. And today we had no one show up. We'll see what happens. I think we have a scheduled participant on Tuesday, our next time. So that session will be filled, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we actually had some people scheduled for today, and they, at the last minute, were unable to come. So I think that my sense of it is there is a very real interest in the opportunity, and that we can translate what we're hearing into some policy initiatives that we'll be bringing back to the board. I hear things that, to me, translate easily into a policy question or an amendment to a policy that we have that might make things clearer to folks about what we mean when we say, maybe we didn't say it very well, so let's make it better.
I think I'd add that we do occasionally hear things that don't necessarily suggest policy, but things that I think the administration, Dr. Beebe, might be interested in hearing, and we'll obviously be reporting those appropriately, where they're operational type information that really won't lead to a policy, but it's something that we should all be aware of.
you have any questions for?
How many people have you talked to?
Well, gosh, the first meeting we had, I think, 5 people there, 4 or 5. I'm forgetting now, the second meeting, we had 2 people, is that right?
I've
lost track.
Count.
I know that this week, today's Thursday, on Tuesday of this week, we had a student and a faculty member there and learned some very illuminating things. Last week, at one meeting, we had 4 people, and I think maybe 3 at another meeting. I don't know what that totals up to.
That sounds about right.
Then today, we had a couple scheduled, and they had a conflict, couldn't come. So we've invited people, if they want to meet with us privately, we will do that. In fact, our meeting on next Tuesday is a private session for part of the time.
Any other thoughts, questions? Craig, you wondering something?
Not at this time. I was expecting a little bit different kind of report, and wasn't what I anticipated. I didn't hear anything that you've done that I really like, that I really feel like I need to question. I'm not. I wasn't there in the meetings, and I wasn't part of what the committee's doing. I'm pretty much against the Board of Trustees holding holding office hours on campus. That's like opening an office. That's not the role of a trustee. If we need to do that for a special cause, where to help us gather information, to show that we're concerned, we're right here. I have feelings about having those office hours. I'm not fully in favor of that. I would not like to see it become a permanent thing. It's just because of how I've been educated, the state meetings that we go to, and we find out the functions of a board, and that has been pretty much frowned on. But in this case, maybe it's the only way to really get to the factors that we need to consider. So I'm anxious to hear how it develops, and at this point, I don't really have a criticism. Just be careful.
Yeah, I think for us to be clear, we don't see this as us having established permanent office hours. I think we all agree we're on a mission to investigate, to learn. And, I can't say that when we finish this, we won't recommend something like that. That's a different story.
Okay.
But that's not where we are at this point.
I have another question.
Good point, Trustee
Unless were you
Nielsen.
gonna say-
Oh, no, I was going to say thank you, Trustee Nielsen. It's good points.
What's your process in terms of like collecting the data you're collecting? Oh, sorry, I said twice. What's your process to collect the data from what you hear from people and then turning that into a report?
Well, I don't think of it as data so much as we're hearing people tell us what they feel is important and relevant to the subjects we've laid out. And I think what is happening is twofold. One is we are looking outside the institution at some of these issues in terms of what has been done elsewhere. And we are then also hearing internally through this mechanism of the office hours, which I too view as temporary. And we talk about what is the policy issue that is inherent in what is being brought to us. What are people telling us that is a policy issue? And I think we will reach consensus on some specific items, which is what we would bring back here, probably in the form of maybe a general statement, but maybe even a specific, here's the policy and we're recommending this change in the language because what we're hearing is whatever. And I view it as a policy outcome. So we will get policies, and those policies will go through the whole process normally, like BPAP and the whole thing. You know, it would just be I mean, the first step in policy is often for the board as a whole to discuss it, the concept, and that is based on a draft, so that might well be the outcome. And then it goes through the process if the board as a whole thinks that's a good idea.
So staff is not involved in being with you to, because that was the case in another committee we had. We had a lot of staff time going into it, but there's no staff time included in this.
None.
We're trying to keep careful notes of our own, so that we, keep our own record of what we're learning, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, no, just because you have so many conversations, how did all those conversations turn into a policy?
And we, I think after each meeting, we kind of compare what we heard, because, you can have 3 people in a room, they're hearing different things, so we by email or in person, we just kind of discussed what we've been hearing.
Any other thoughts? Okay, well, thank you, guys. And just for the record, I just want to note it that because our item just says update from the ad hoc committee, so I just want to reiterate that this information we're receiving is an update from the ad hoc committee on gender equity, sexual harassment, and respectful conversations on difficult subjects. And as Trustee Nielsen reminded us, this is an ad hoc committee. It will come to an end. So it's not going to be a standing committee that's going to go on, which to Trustee Booth's point, at that point, we would then be having staff and all of that. So, so thank you guys for working in a trio. 2 is better than 1.
It has to be said, it's a fair amount of work.
I'm sure it is.
Coming on campus 2 extra days a week for 2 extra hours a week. And of course, the pay is worth it, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And though we may not be entirely clear about what the end product is going to be, I think that's really a good thing, because it means that we don't have any preconceived notions about how this thing is, what we can bring back to you. But we're committed to bringing it back to you within that 60-day period of time that you gave us. And none of us is, I think, eager to continue much beyond that. I think we will be happy to celebrate the ad hoc nature of this committee.
No, I think it's good. And I mean, like Trustee Aboud mentioned, the qualitative data, I think, is what Trustee Aboud was alluding to. And yes, it's not going to be hard numbers of, X percentage, but that anecdotal qualitative data, and I think maybe that's what you were thinking.
I meant.
Yeah.
There are different kinds of data.
So, but teacher and me, that's what I thought. So, and I think that that's what you guys will be providing in terms of that anecdotal qualitative conversation and observations and that are coming in. Okay.
But I would add also that I think that largely, if not exclusively, the people who participated are not going to be in the report. I mean, this is.
Right, right.
It's not appropriate that they should be.
Right, yeah. Okay, thank you, guys. Well, 5:50, item 8.1, is there a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Trustee Haslund and second by Trustee Mueller to adjourn at 6:50. All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn at 5:50. Oh, my gosh. Okay, aye. Adjourn. Thank you, guys.